T minus 80 seconds. T minus 70 seconds. T minus 60 seconds. T minus 50 seconds. T minus 40 seconds. T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. 15 seconds.
Happy Father's Day, everyone. I understand it's Father's Day in America and the UK, so welcome. I am a father, and so my gift is I get to do this all by myself today. I did get a wonderful gift from my daughter. This is what she gave me. The Yoda Best Dad Ever. Does she know me or what? Phil, I don't know why Phil's bugging out on me. He actually created the entire stream and then ditched me at the last second. So what can you do? What can you do? Let me know if you guys can hear me okay. I've been kind of dicking around with the mic. Hopefully it's a little bit better, a little bit it picks up a little less of my inhales and things like that. I would love to put a noise gate on here, but it's not. I have to figure it out because the mic software itself doesn't do that. And yeah, so but this time I'm not the one late. It's everyone else. Yep, Big Gator. It's just me today. So there you go. So I will get into a few things. The biggest one is I did see The Flash, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Probably going to keep it short since it's just me, and I know my thank you, Catherine. I know my kids want to do something with me later this afternoon. Probably kill me and get their inheritance early. I don't know, something along those lines. So yeah. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get started here. So it looks like Andor is gearing up for the end. The showrunner is talking about I guess it's well here I will read the story for you and then you guys can hear what's going on and then make up your own minds. But just as Rogue One is arguably the most creatively successful Star Wars effort on the big screen since the Disney takeover, so Andor is by far the best small screen effort. This is especially true since The Mandalorian stumbled so badly in season 3. Andor was like the grown-ups were suddenly back in charge as politics and espionage were patiently and thoughtfully woven across the story. Proper actors doing proper acting. Believable characters behaving in believable ways with actual growth and facing real challenges. So, in a normal industry, in a normal company, the senior leadership might actually learn something from this. This is Lucasfilm, however. Ahsoka, Skeleton Crew, and The Acolyte will be here soon. One production still in flight was the second season of Andor, which began shooting its second season in November and was originally to wrap in August. The writer's strike has impacted this, and Tony Gilroy has not restarted production. One advantage this show has was that it was always going to be just 2 seasons of 12 episodes. No chance to drag it out in the event of renewal or additional season order. Maybe there is another learning there. Hey, Lucasfilm? This means their destination is known and fixed for the story. In a recent EW interview, Gilroy confirmed this definite destination of the start of Rogue One means characters are about to appear and story beats are going to happen. That will be familiar to those of you who know the lore. Quote, of course, I mean, yes. The answer is yes. There are some that are inevitable. There are some that are surprising. And there are some that we probably can't get for various reasons. But you kind of know who's in the stew there. You certainly know who's going to be on Yavin 4. Cassie and Mon Mothma have a scene together in Rogue One. So, yeah. And the calendar is inevitable. In some ways, for the people in this convention and for the people who really know these 5 years, there are some big events on the calendar that we will have to pay attention to, and we will. Alan Tudyk's droid, K2SO, and Saw Gerrera's Gregorian friend Moroff are both expected. Felicity Jones has confirmed that Jyn Erso will not be there and she's not involved, which makes sense because, you know, she didn't meet everybody until that movie. So if the strike ends, Andor will be back with us in 2024. So, all right, guys, comments, questions. Do you think I mean, I liked Andor. I didn't love Andor. I thought Andor was definitely the smartest of the Star Wars, and there was a lot of things I appreciated, like making the Emperor a threat again, or the Empire, I should say, a threat again instead of a joke. I thought we had very competent people doing really good things, and I also like the way that bureaucracy and fear kind of kept people in the Empire from able to accomplishing anything, and all the backbiting and all that kind of stuff, which is very much what it's like in a real world dictatorship. If you want to really see how that happened, watch the Chernobyl miniseries, how they were so stuck in their arrogance and in their fear that they wouldn't believe what happened actually happened, even though the guy was like, hey, just look outside. I would love to see that kind of mentality translated more into the Empire. But we got a little bit of that, a little sprinkling of that. And I liked that. And I liked a lot of things in it. There was things I didn't like in it. I think there were times where they almost put Andor off to the side, like they put him in prison just to seem to get him out of the way for 4 episodes. And they had so many things that were just stretched it out way too long, and he just kept going, get to it. But it wasn't childish. It was generally pretty competent. Just needed to be tightened up, I think, quite a bit. Certainly better than what we got with Mandalorian season 3. Now, I liked season 1 and season 2 a lot, but it was a lot of, I don't know. I mean, we complained about this with Star Trek, you know, these and a lot of these series, these overarching series, and we'd like to get back to some more of those one and done episodes and move on with just a little bit of arc going on. And I think they had that in Mandalorian. But some of the episodes were, you know, when you have, there's a plus and a minus. If you have an overarching story, you know exactly what you're going to do, and you're really tight your storytelling. You have things like the first few seasons of Game of Thrones, which were fantastic. When you do really good individual storytelling, which is a little bit of arc, you can get some of the best seasons of, say, Star Trek Next Generation or Deep Space Nine. But when you don't, you get a really mixed bag. And so you get really highs, really lows. And I think there was a little bit of that in The Mandalorian season 1. Some really, really good episodes and some real episodes like, what's the point of that? So what do you guys think? You got any comments on that? I'm going to read more comments than I ever have. This is going to go well. Okay. You guys need another commentator? We might. Give me a little bit. If it's so successful, then why is it a ratings failure? You know, I hesitate to say because it didn't do well with general audiences that something is a failure, because then we'd have to say The Thing in 1982 was a failure, and Blade Runner in 1982 was a failure because they didn't do well at the box office. Hell, A Christmas Story with the BB gun would be a failure. It's something people discovered later on, but it didn't do well at the time. So I don't know that that's necessarily the way it's going to go, but we'll see. All right, moving on. Do you feel old yet? Because Jurassic Park, it was a party for the Velociraptors. Jurassic Park is 30 this year, which is just blows my mind. And I also think of Jurassic Park as the end of an era. I think it started with Jaws in 1975. I call it the Spielberg era, although there was a lot of people that did a lot of different movies, from Zemeckis to George Lucas to, all sorts of people. Even Ivan Reitman with the Ghostbusters. And there's all the action movies and everything. But the 80s, it really pretty much encompasses the 80s, but it really got kicked off with Spielberg in 1975. And I think we just had an unparalleled amount of creativity and things that they are still trying to. They're strip mining that era. Everything is a strip mine of that era now. From Star Wars, now you got Jurassic World. They're bringing back Indiana Jones for some terrible, crappy stuff. I don't know. You can even look at Superman and the first two Batman movies. It's like that was the first time they realized that superheroes could be viable, and now everything is a superhero movie. You can make an argument that they're just strip mining superhero movies too. So I feel like Jurassic Park was the end of a creative output in '93, because you had one more year of Disney good movie, which was The Lion King. And then after that, that Disney Renaissance kind of tapered off. And did we have anything good after that? Well, 99 was a pretty stellar year, between The Matrix and Fight Club and several other movies. And then, of course, you had the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I think the Harry Potter saga is pretty quality. But it all there's just little nuggets in the turds, little gold nuggets here and there in the sea of turds that, for a lot of it started with Independence Day or Twister, just effects over substance. And I think in some ways it's been going on to this day. Now, I think the MCU saga has been generally really, really good up until Endgame, and then it's been garbage. But I don't know. I mean, I just don't see a lot of quality. I feel like that we never achieved the kind of quality and creativity and the creation of IPs. I mean, just every year, one after another, a new damn IP felt like it was coming out to get into the public consciousness. We don't have that anymore. I can't remember the last time something came out that really captured the public's imagination. I guess you might say Avatar, but I don't get the Avatar movies. I don't understand why they're so popular. But even after they're popular, I don't see YouTube channel after YouTube channel created delving into the lore. Like I see these guys, there's like 1,000 Star Trek channels in there going into every little bit in detail about the Federation, the Klingons, they just go nuts about it. They've been doing that for decades. I see stuff like that with Star Wars. I see stuff like that with comic book heroes and so many of those IPs. I don't see that with Avatar. It's like a huge money-making success that has no cultural impact at all. And I am completely mystified by it. Between the two of them, they made $5 billion, and they have almost zero cultural impact. So, yeah, I just don't see anything that's done the way these guys are. Let's see here. I didn't say bad, but the article said it was a success. I would say what Stark was saying is that it was a creative success. Whether or not it got hit hard in the ratings or really captured Star Wars fans, I think the jury's still out on that. I have a feeling Andor once it's finished is going to be one of those slow burns that people discover later. You know, Breaking Bad was like that. I mean, they'll tell you that Netflix saved Breaking Bad because people had kind of watched it and there was a little word of mouth. But once it got on Netflix and people could binge like the first 3 seasons, that's when it took off. That's when everybody started having to watch it live on AMC later on. So I think maybe Andor becomes that. It really depends on how well they stick the landing. The problem is that what's his name? The Luna, the actor. He's just doesn't have a ton of charisma, and I love Stellan Skarsgård in it, but I look back on Rogue One and everybody's just kind of a block of wood. So I don't know. I mean, this is one of those things. We'll have to wait a decade and see how it's doing. But you know, I'm sure I'm at the very least it's more successful than Willow, which they've already pulled off the street. It's taking up room on the servers. Get it out of here. Jurassic Park, the first one, and Jurassic World, the first one, was the best of the franchise. The rest of those movies are absolutely terrible. Yeah, I actually can't watch the first Jurassic World. I think I liked it the first time, and this was back in 2015, so I'm still getting fooled by the nostalgia bait. But I've gone back and tried to watch it again. It's like, but I can watch that first Jurassic Park so much. A lot of people think Jurassic Park is empty. I'm like, there are so many themes of parenthood and fatherhood and overcoming fears of that sort of thing, and it's everywhere in that damn movie. And it's funny to me how people don't see any of that. Like they just say, "Oh, it's just popcorn entertainment." It's like, no, there's a lot going on there. There's a reason why people still love Jurassic Park. There's a reason why people still go and watch Jurassic Park or will pop it in every once in a while 30 years later. And while they're still trying desperately to churn out movies that just don't work. I tell you what, I think Jurassic Park is the more modern day Jaws, because Jaws was a perfect movie in and of itself. And there was no way you were going to properly get that recipe again with a big shark attacking people movie. It's just, it's so difficult. And we've seen, I mean, most of them are garbage on Sci-Fi Channel. And even the direct sequels of Jaws, they just kept getting worse and worse and worse. They never could figure out what that movie was about, because the movie wasn't really about the shark. It was about the camaraderie between 3 very disparate personalities, and kind of a great hunt movie almost. And people just think it's just the shark, and the shark is the star of that movie, and it's not even close. That's why they couldn't even get the damn thing to work. So nobody's been able to figure out that recipe. And I think Jurassic Park's the same way. The dinosaurs are part of it, but they are a force that the humans have to deal with while dealing with all these themes of family. Some of it, themes of control and nature. Those are the things that make Jurassic Park resonate for so long, not giant dinosaurs. So they haven't been able to do it. Okay, moving on. Zod isn't happy about Superman. So Michael Shannon was in Flash, and we'll get to him in a bit. We'll get to Flash in a bit. But we are 3 days away from the official release of Flash. This is when this article came out. And the marketing is at maximum speed. However, not all of it is positive, with the latest snipe from one of the film's stars, Michael Shannon. In a new interview with Collider, Mike got honest about his return as Zod. General Zod. Previously, Shannon revealed that he was a little confused when he received the offer to join The Flash and reprise his role of General Zod from Man of Steel. Now he's revealed that those complicated feelings were not resolved while making DC's latest mess in a desperate attempt to finally rid themselves of the Snyderverse. I'm not going to lie, it wasn't quite satisfying for me as an actor. These multiverse movies are like somebody playing with action figures. Here's this person, here's that person, and they're fighting. It's not quite the in-depth character study situation I honestly felt Man of Steel was. Whether people think that's crazy or not, I don't even care. I just felt like Man of Steel was actually a pretty sophisticated story. Uh, so he actually he also goes on to talk about that he actually liked working with Ezra Miller, and um, it's I think he was right. If you look at the Flash, it just Michael Zod was there because he is he was a person from a previous time that it was kind of like the Back to the Future 2 effect. It's like, yeah, all these guys are back in there because he went back to the same time from the first movie, so of course they had to be in there. If you go back to 2013, then General Zod would have to be there. That would make sense, but he didn't have anything to do other than just kind of do what he did before. But he didn't have any. I think he had maybe, I don't know, 10 lines of dialogue or less. It wasn't much. So I can understand why he wanted to be unhappy. Why he'd be unhappy. Okay. Based Michael Shannon. Well, I mean, based, maybe. I don't know. I just think he just was like, hey, I got this part. I didn't have anything to do with it. I just said a few lines on a green screen stage, and it was almost a bit part. I think as an actor, it was more that he was disappointed because he just didn't get to do anything. Bang, bang, fight the fights. And yeah, he's right. He didn't get to do much in it. So it kind of sucked for him, I think. But it is what it is. I do want to talk about something that I watched recently called Primal. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen this. It's a I'm going to screw up the name, but Gennady Tartakovsky. And if you're not familiar with that name, if you're familiar with Samurai Jack, or if you remember when they did the animated Clone Wars back right before episode 3 came out, he's the guy that animates this. And there are times where I really miss good 2D animation, and this show is pretty gorgeous for the most part. It's about a caveman who partners with a dinosaur after both of their families are killed. So he comes back after a hunt and he watches his family get eaten by some red tyrannosaurs. And they call him Spear, although there is no dialogue in this show. Except once in a while, there's like in the second season, they meet up with kind of a civilization, but nobody speaks English and there's no subtitles. So it's all a very, you just have to infer from facial expressions of what's going on the screen and what's happening, what the story is, and which is not difficult. And so after his family is killed, he stumbles across a blue tyrannosaur, and she is taking care of her newly freshed hatchlings. And at first he wanted to go after her because to him, he didn't really get a good look at the tyrannosaur, so he just assumes it's one that killed. But then he sees the fresh hatchlings. Then the actual ones that killed his family come in trying to eat the hatchlings, and he decides to help her. But unfortunately, he fails. And they fail, and the hatchlings get killed. They are able to kill the red tyrannosaurs, but not in time to save the hatchlings. And so this blue one decides to befriend this caveman, and we call him Spear. And Spear, and she is called Fang because she has one big fang that comes up underneath. And they have to go on this various things that happen to them. And by the end of the first season, they meet up with a woman. I can't remember her name. That's sad. But she the only reason we know her name because she tells him what his name is. It's like the only word he knows how to say is her name. And the second season, she gets captured again. She escapes slavery, and then she gets captured again. It's him going to rescue her, and then them getting captured one more time by this giant Egyptian. And it's very anachronistic. You know, you've got woolly mammoths, you've got dinosaurs, you've got Egyptian civilization, you got a Viking civilization. It's all thrown together in this stew, but somehow it all works. And I was a little put off by the ending. I don't think it's a terrible ending. I just not quite the choice I would have made, but overall, it's still well worth your time. It's only 2 seasons. There's 10 episodes, and each of the episodes are like 25 minutes or something like that. You know, they're half-hour episodes, but half-hour if there were commercials. So, because I think it was originally on Adult Swim, but you can watch it on Max. It does not shy away from gore and blood, and you know, it's called Primal, and it's very, you know, it's a rough world to live in. There's one where a diseased dinosaur bites a brachiosaurus type thing, and then that dinosaur gets diseased. And when a dinosaur that big becomes a raging, diseased maniac with half of his flesh melting off because of some sort of weird flesh disease or something like that, and he's just going after Fang and Spear, and you know that if it even scratches them, they'll get the disease, assuming it doesn't kill them. It's one of the most terrifying episodes I think I've ever seen put on screen. It really, and I just don't get scared at movies anymore. It's been so long time, but I mean, the tension was really well done. So Primal, I'm giving it the Yoda recommendation. If you haven't watched it, I can understand why it may not be your cup of tea, but I really, really recommend it. Wasn't he behind Korgoth too? I'm not familiar with Korgoth, but he might have been. I'll take your word for it on that. I like his stuff. I like his animation style and the way he does things. And with Primal, he was like in Samurai Jack. You know, there is a bit of a budget there, I think. So I think he uses that to his advantage. But there's a simplicity to the background and the artwork and stuff. Not that it doesn't look great, but the detail in Primal and the color and the vibrancy of it is just amazing. And then the animation is very smooth, and it feels more expensive than it probably was. But I guess this they're going to keep doing it, but it's going to be more of an anthology, like these first 2 seasons were Spear and Fang, and then the next 2 seasons will be something else. We'll see. It was very engaging, and you know, not a word was spoken. Not until the woman arrived. Then yap. That's when all the talking started. Oh, demonetized already. Christopher Nolan. He might be back at Warner. So let me take you back to a time in the far distant past of 2020. Everything seems a little silly now. We look back at the COVID times. Queuing 2 meters apart in our face masks to get into a grocery store. A toilet roll panic. Where were you during the great toilet paper wars? Mass money printing, doomed to destroy family budgets through rampant inflation, and interest rates rise to tame it when the bill became due. Closing moving theaters and shutting down productions in an attempt to prevent people catching something that pretty much all of us would eventually catch had other side effects. Among them was Christopher Nolan's falling out with Warner Brothers. Following 2002's Insomnia Awards, Nolan was a fixture at Warner Brothers, and they had a huge success together. Nolan pretty much had free reign at the studio and was trusted with it. In the depths of the COVID, Warner's tried a new strategy, driven by AT&T, to release movies in both cinemas and streaming simultaneously. As a side note, isn't it funny that after all that, AT&T sold Warner to Discover? Like, we're out. Really, I don't know why they thought the internet telephone and cell phone company could run movie studios, but Coca-Cola owned Columbia Pictures once, so what do I know? As theaters and key markets were closing down, this was an attempt to leverage some costs on new releases to grow their newly launched HBO Max streaming service. There was a debate. Nolan refused to allow Tenet to go to streaming as a day-and-date release, so it was let loose in theaters, where it became a rare flop for the pairing. In the fallout, Warner recommitted to their day-and-date strategy, and Nolan reportedly said that he didn't make movies to end up releasing them on, quote, the fourth best streaming service. And the partnership dissolved. Nolan moved on to Universal, and next month's Oppenheimer is the result. But now, Warner Brothers part of Discovery, and Pam Abdi and Michael DeLuca run the studio. Their reputation with creatives is said to be strong. David Zaslav is also a big supporter of the theatrical experience, so DeLuca has told Variety that they want Nolan back. According to the report in the trade, the studio has started the Charm Offensive with a 7-figure royalty check for Tenet as a gesture of good faith. Meanwhile, Universal and Warner go head-to-head next week with Nolan in the middle as Oppenheimer and Barbie open up on the same day. Well, I gotta admit, I don't see a lot of crossover in those two audiences, except for maybe our own Sean Thompson. Go figure. Apparently, Boba and Sean really have a hard-on for Barbie. Or maybe it's Margot Robbie. I don't know. But, I mean, obviously, Nolan was right. And AT&T was wrong. And the day-and-date strategy stuff for streaming and movies, I think, has cheapened movies as an art form. Movies right now are the last shared cultural thing that I think we have. I think it's the thing that people do as an activity as much as to enjoy a new movie or enjoy an art form. Kids take their dates to movies because it's a reasonably cheap form of entertainment, and so on and so forth. So they to just throw them on streaming the same day as you throw them on theaters, you're not only destroying theaters as a business in the marketplace, but you're cheapening your own product. Because if it's just you're never going to get away from the stigma of straight to DVD, if you know what I mean, or straight to video, direct to digital, whatever you want to call it. It's never going to. That's always going to have a stigma with it. If it wasn't released in theaters, it's not going to be seen as serious as something that was released in theaters. So you're going to destroy everything that goes along with with the industry in general. I mean, movies are still kind of a glitzy. They should be anyway. I mean, I think there is a huge argument to be said that movies have been destroying themselves with poor writing, with emphasis on style over substance and that sort of thing. And that you can find much more quality in many, many TV shows these days. Not all, of course, but the ones that are farther away from some IP. For instance, the streaming of Star Wars shows isn't nearly as well thought of as a streaming of something like a Breaking Bad. So I just don't see. I think that Discovery is making the right decision here, saying no. We will destroy our whole industry if we go down this route. I mean, I still think it comes out too fast onto digital. I think Fast X came out like 3 weeks after it was released in theaters. I mean, if you saw it in theaters, then you're not going to go run out and buy the streaming because you just saw it 3 weeks ago. And if you didn't see it in theaters, because you're just waiting to see the streaming because you know it's going to come out in 3 weeks. So you're giving nobody an incentive to go to the theater, or vice versa, you're giving nobody an incentive to buy it on digital. So they need to put some and this is something I think we've talked about for so many different things. You need to put some distance between the release in theaters and bringing it out on digital, just like you need distance between sequels and things like that. This is partially why the MCU is failing so bad. It's just too much stuff coming out with no direction, and they didn't give themselves any time to really make any direction. So I don't know. It does. Warner's making the right choice. Good. If Nolan sees that, I don't know what kind of contract he has with Universal, or if it's that simple, or if it's just he's getting paid by the picture. And if he wants to make a new contract with Warner's, he can do that anytime he wants. I don't know any of the legal ramifications there. So we'll see. Unfortunately, I think Nolan started the breakdown with the Dark Knight Rises. It hasn't recovered. I don't get how some regresses in talent, but here we are. I don't think it's. I don't know. I mean, regress in talent. I think it's difficult to do what you did before every time. I think it gets harder and harder to try to top yourself. I think that's been a lament of creatives for decades, whether you're making music or whether you're making movies or whatever. You're a writer, you're a novelist, whatever it is, trying to get back to those heights of that perfect thing you made. I mean, George Lucas has never been able to do it. And Spielberg has had a pretty consistent output, I would say. But even he makes good dramas now, historical dramas especially. But he doesn't make very good popcorn movies anymore. I mean, what was it? The Giant was no good. The Ready Player One was no good. He's not able to recapture what he did with things like Raiders and Close Encounters and Jaws and E.T. and things like that. So I don't know. I think maybe it's unfortunate. I think what the studios need to stop doing is trying to keep getting blood from these turnips and find these new creatives that didn't come from some HR department. That's what they need to do. We'll see about Oppenheimer. I have low expectations for Nolan. Yeah, I mean, I thought Tenet was way too complicated, way too overstuffed. I loved Inception because in the end of the day, it's just a big heist movie. And the goal is to get back to his family. That's the anchor of the entire movie. Everything else is just a really enjoyable way to get there. I think The Dark Knight is still the best superhero movie ever made. The Dark Knight Rises, I've kind of liked better in the coming years, but yeah, I agree it's got problems. Interstellar, I've never gone back to. What else has he done? I know he did Tenet. What did he do before? I don't remember. But point is, yeah, I don't see Nolan as a must see anymore. I could take or leave, and I'm going to kind of wait on Oppenheimer to see how it does. So we'll kind of go from there. So it is what it is. All right. Let's talk about The Flash, and then we'll wrap it up. So our own Matt Aggieweg is clearly angered over The Flash. And I did not think it was nearly as bad as he made it out to be. But I don't want it to come across like I think it was a success. I would put it in the category of a mostly sincere failure. I think they were trying to do something. And I'm not sure if there was studio involvement. Maybe because I think Michael Keaton's Batman was supposed to be part of a larger story. And I think maybe there had to be some changes in it to deal with that. I think there were some real creative missteps in some of the execution. But the baseline idea was pretty good. And there's some moments in there that are really interesting. Um, the CGI, I think they were trying to do something with the CGI because of the flash effect and all that kind of stuff. It just didn't really look good, and I can understand him being a little bit angry at that because the Flash was delayed. It was in the can for a while. They had plenty of time to really fix those special effects, and they didn't. But or maybe they think they did. I don't know. And then there's some bizarre tonal choices that really don't work in the movie. Some jokes and some humor that don't work in the movie. And that's the weird thing about it. I wish I could. I can't hate it like Eggy does because I think underlying there's something there. There's something interesting there that I kind of liked. So we start out. It's not as complex as you might think. It's a little. It's not as. It's really not that difficult to follow or anything like that. Big gulp. So you got the Flash, and he's working with Batman. One of the guys his criminals, I think the son of Carmine Falcone, has taken some virus or something and destroyed a hospital. So while Batman goes after the criminals, he's asked the Flash to save the people in the hospital, and that gives us our first special effects thing. The problem is that it's I mean, the idea is that the hospital partially collapses and the maternity ward slides out the windows, and so babies are raining from the sky. This should be really concerning. This should be given some weight. These are, newborn infants. You should have something a little bit more, I don't know, tense about it. But instead, we get the Flash doing all this kind of stuff to save them, which is fine. But it's almost played comedically, and that really lets the air out of the tires of trying to be. If you want this to feel tense, if you want this to feel like he's got to do it, and you're kind of laughing and it's jokey, he's sticking a baby in a microwave to try to save it, and all this other stuff. It's like, okay, I'm just kind of pulled out at that point. We did have Batfleck in kind of a blue Batman suit, like the blue cape and the blue cowl, which was kind of nice looking. And then Wonder Woman came in at the very end and had a quick jokey moment with the lasso of truth where, I mean, I don't think the lasso of truth is like a confession instigator. It's not something that it elicits confessions randomly from you. It's like if you ask a question, then they have to tell the truth. It isn't like you just start blurting out stuff like you're in a therapist session. I've said this is what all these writers know. They only know the inside of a therapist or a group session kind of thing. That's all they know. And I think that's where some of these jokes come in. So I was kind of like, okay, I guess this is just going to be a joke. But then the Barry has to try to find some way to save his dad. He's got one last ditch effort of a security cam that would show that his dad was at the grocery store at the time of his mother's murder. But he never looks up, so they don't have a clear view of his face, so they're done. And his dad's going to be stuck in jail. And Barry goes back and has kind of a brief flashback with his home, and he starts running just in anguish, and he accidentally goes back in time. And when he gets back to the present, he tells Bruce what he saw and says, I could save my mother. And he figures out a way to do this without really interacting. And I thought this was very clever. It's like his dad went back out to get a can of sauce, just a can of sauce that his mom had forgotten at the store. So he goes back and he puts the can of sauce in her cart, which means they never would have gone to the store, which means the guy whoever did it wouldn't have broken in and messed him up. I was like, that's clever. I like that. I like that idea that just the smallest thing can alter your life tremendously. And I think that was a neat way to do it. Then he gets back though, as he's heading back, this dark flash knocks him out of the time bubble, and he ends up in 2013 instead of 2023. He gets back 10 years too early. He doesn't realize at the time, but he sees his mom's alive, his dad is home, and then his 18-year-old self comes home, and he's like, oh, I messed up. And so then he works with his 18-year-old self, and he realizes his 18-year-old self is not at the crime lab, because if he's not, why is he not at the crime lab? Because he went into trying to learn criminology to free his dad. But since his dad is free, he has no reason to do that. So he's not going to be at the crime lab that day when he's supposed to get his powers. So now he has to fix that. And I hate to say it, Ezra Miller does a really good job in this, being annoying 18-year-old and 25-year-old who has been through much more life difficulties than his goofy 18-year-old self has, who's had a completely different life. And that, I got to give the guy credit as an actor of pulling that off. He probably deserves to be in jail. I mean, I'm not going to lie. He should be in jail. That doesn't mean that he can't act really well when he wants to. And if you can't see past his craziness, I can understand that. I mean, it's probably difficult. I get that. I'm not advocating that necessarily that you should separate art from artists or that kind of stuff, or defend him or anything like that. I think he should be in jail. I'm just saying he did a good job. I thought he did a good job. If he's so annoying to you and everything, you probably won't think so, and that's fine. I wouldn't. Far be it from me to disabuse you of that notion. So he gets Barry to where he's going to be at the Lightning, and unfortunately, because of a series of misevents, the Lightning goes through old Barry to young Barry, removes old Barry's powers, but young Barry gets his powers now. So now old Barry no longer has powers. So as it progresses, then Zod comes down. This is the day Zod comes down, and he has to try to fight him. So he wants to go find Superman, but Superman isn't there anymore. Then he finds out it was through finding out that Eric Stoltz started Back to the Future, and that means that Kevin Bacon started in Top Gun, and that means that Michael J. Fox started in Footloose. It was, all these changes have happened. Now, a lot of people had a real problem with this because it doesn't make sense. I agree, it doesn't make sense at all. That if he changed something in the past, then things farther back in the past would also get changed. That doesn't make any logical sense to me. But unfortunately, that's kind of the way the original Flashpoint Paradox story was. It was a very similar kind of deal. That random events changed because Barry, that shouldn't have had anything to do with that. I mean, why would Clark Kent's rocket land in Russia instead of, or wherever it landed? It's somewhere where the government can find them instead of in the Kent's farm because Barry saved his mother. That's what happened in the original comic. I didn't like it then because I don't think it made sense, but you either accept that or you don't. And I think a lot of people don't want to accept that, so they don't like it. But okay, fine. He changes it, and the only person left is Batman, but it's not Batfleck anymore. It's Michael Keaton's Batman, and that's the universe we're in, is the one that he was in 89 and 92. That's the excuse to get him in, and Keaton explains it all like through the uses we get. He tries to come up with some half-ass explanation about how, we get the line, "That's not how time works." Okay, whatever. It's just a way to make this parallel universe happen. And so instead of Superman, we get Supergirl. They have to rescue her, much like they have to do in the comic where they have to rescue Superman. And she helps them with Zod. And the climax gets to, they have this, Barry's able to get his powers back, very similar to what they did in the comic where they strap him to a chair, put the chemicals, and try to get a lightning bolt. And the first time it doesn't work, and the second time it does, because of course it does. Why doesn't it work the first time? Why does it work the second time? Because that's the way it was in the comics, but there's no logical reason for that. This is where I say it's like a sincere failure. It's like they're trying, but they don't. They're either aping things that happen in the comics, or they're having jokes that are inappropriate, or don't land, or don't make sense, or they do things that don't make sense, and you go, okay, well, why are we doing that? It doesn't. It's like the overall idea is that there are moments in time that can't be changed, and we have to accept these things, these bad things that happen in our lives, because they are part of what makes us who we are. If Barry doesn't become the Flash, if all this stuff does, this is kind of broadened out to a much larger scale. But if he doesn't become the Flash, then so many other things don't happen, and we end up in a much worse place than the sacrifice of your mother. Now, you could say, is that fate? Is that destiny? I mean, those are some interesting questions. But it's never really taken to any great degree. And then when the two Flashes are fighting, and then they keep trying, Kara keeps getting killed, Batman keeps getting killed, they keep trying to go back, fix it, Zod keeps killing him, and they realize they're never going to fix this. And that's when the Dark Flash at the very beginning comes into their time bubble, and you realize it's the young Barry that's with him that has been continuing to do this over and over and over again. Now he's old, he's all messed up. And so the young Barry sacrifices himself when the old Barry tries to kill it's very confusing, but our Barry, let's put it that way. And so when he disappears, you get the Looper thing where the old messed up Barry that's been trying this for years, he disappears too, because now he hasn't been born. And so there's no rules in all of this. What if it doesn't, would that change it? Or I don't know. But in the end, he goes back and he takes the can after himself puts the can in, he takes the can back out. And then he has a tearful moment with his mom, who doesn't know it's him, but it's a nice moment. And it's a very good emotional moment. And then he saves his dad by rearranging the shelves so that they're on the top shelf instead of the bottom shelf, so he has to look up at the camera. And then when he gets back to the future, then he's able to free his dad. And that's a nice little coda to that. Okay, so he said everything right again, right? Except that at the very, very end, Bruce comes up and says, I'm glad you saved your dad, except it's not Ben Affleck anymore, it's George Clooney. Why is it George Clooney? Because remember George Clooney as Batman? That's what it was. But it's like, okay. Again, it's just a horrible. I guess it's kind of to symbolize that they're destroying this DCEU, but that it will still kind of go on in its own way, I suppose. But it's like, if that's changed, what else has changed? And is it better or worse? Did nothing in the movie that we learned matter, because in the end, he didn't actually bring back the universe he should have? Why would there be an older Bruce? This is where I get irritated. It's because, you have some really interesting ideas in this, or some, and you're not woke. The movie wasn't really woke or anything like that. It wasn't trying to put the message down our throat. But for every interesting thing it did something else to either undercut itself or to not execute it properly or successfully. And so you end up not really feeling much like you should. It's like, I could see what they're trying to do, but they're executing it so poorly that I don't have anything to latch onto here. So in the end, it becomes a very mediocre film that I feel like tried to do more. I feel like with a rewrite or two and a couple of edits and maybe some reshoots of a few things here and there, and maybe some insertion of something that would tie stuff from the beginning to the end, because putting George Clooney in there at the end, instead of having Ben Affleck come back out to show that the world is okay again and everything is fine, and this will continue on. Yes, I understand you're destroying the DCEU. I get it. It's fine. We're not that stupid. We understand you're rebooting, you're going to a new thing. But if you're going to do that, then bring in the guy that you've cast as Batman. And if you don't have anybody cast as Batman, then make it a big mystery. But don't bring out George Clooney. What are you doing? So I mean, I understand the negativity about the CGI. I can generally somewhat forgive CGI or special. If I wasn't going to forgive CGI, I couldn't like the original Tron anymore. I mean, I know these guys are overworked ridiculously. I do think some of it's inexcusable because they had a lot more time than some of these other movies have, but it's like I'm not going to, if the story is good and engaging, I'm not going to lose my mind over bad CGI. I'll make it a criticism, but I'm not going to say that ruined the movie if the rest of the movie is working. But the rest of the movie only kind of worked. It sort of worked, but then it kind of kept undercutting itself, and not because of bad humor or something, just because it just didn't seem to know what it was trying to say. And when you think it knows what it's trying to say, then it does something like at the end where it brings out George Clooney to undercut what it just tried to say. So I'm going, okay. It's not going to make anybody's top 10 list. It's not going to make my top 10 list, that's for sure. But it's not going to make my worst movie of the year either. It's more, I was more angry at something like Eternals or some of these MCU, the Captain Marvel and some of the stuff, which is just trying to shove some stupid political message down your throat and is really a She-Hulk, things like that. They're just so awful and wrong. This wasn't trying to do any of that. I think it just, like I said, I think it's sincere. It's just a sincere failure. That's what I come to. I know some people really hate it. Some people seem to really like it. And I'm going to be Mr. Fence Sitter on this one. I'm going to be like, well, yeah, some of the criticisms are warranted, and some of the stuff they try to do, I think, was interesting and pretty good. And I think the biggest criticism the one criticism I have that I would like to point out is that people are very much they look at it and say, well, it's just member berries. Maybe. I mean, they certainly brought in Michael Keaton as a big member berry. But after that, there weren't, well, no, that's not true. I forgot. So when they are screwing around with time, I can't believe I forgot about all this. When they're screwing around with time as much as they are, all these other multiverse worlds start coming in. They're all going to collide. And one of the worlds is Superman and Supergirl, Helen Slater and Christopher Reeve. And one of the worlds is Nick Cage, Superman from the failed project that never came to be. And he is fighting a giant spider in it. And one of them is, I didn't get a good look at it, but one of them was, I think, the 66 Batman. And I'm sure there were some others. And people were like, well, it's all member berries. I was like, look, if you're going to bring in multiple worlds, I mean, the DC Comics have done this all the time. They do this constantly. This is something that's lifted right out of all these worlds. If you read Infinite Crisis, or if you've read anything in the last 10 years where they do some sort of world-ending multiversal crisis, they do this all the time, where they bring back moments or different worlds from different DC publications. And so doing this, it just didn't bother me like it bothered other people, because it wasn't like, it was just saying, we're bringing in different worlds. If we're going to bring in different worlds, why not do something that's a little, kind of fun and familiar? It didn't really matter that much to the story that they brought in Christopher Reeve and Helen Slater than it would have if they had brought in. They even had the George Reeves Superman, in black and white. And I was like, would it have mattered if they had done this with just nobodies that you had never seen before, just different versions of the Flash and different versions of Henry Cavill or something like that? It wouldn't have mattered. So, I mean, if they were trying to have a little fun with it, and I think that's all they were trying to do, that didn't bother me. I just think, I wish I could talk about this. It's so much easier to talk about these more than yeah, I do need a second. It just needed more to work off of because it just didn't know what it wanted to say, I think sometimes. And I feel like this may have been studio involvement. I feel like this may have been because they wanted to bring in this whole thing with Keaton. They wanted to do these different things, and then they had to shelve Batgirl, and they had to cancel another one that was supposed to have Batman in it, and now they have just the Flash, and they're trying to make it all work and say, okay, we're just going to sweep all this under the rug and move on to the next thing, and it really undercut whatever this movie was trying to do. I think that's what happened, and because of that, that's probably why half of the CGI is so dodgy because they had to do all these reshoots or something. So that's what it is. That's the Flash. I'm going to say you're fine to wait till it comes out on streaming or digital. It's not, I don't know that I would waste the time going to the theater with it. So I think that's it. I'm going to cut it short because I do have the kids to spend some time with. It is Father's Day. I think an hour is good enough to hear my ramblings, my sultry voice that sounds like I've been gargling hot asphalt. Oh, that's good asphalt. So, thank you very much for watching. We are lastmovieoutpost.com. You can meet us on Twitter at @movieoutpost. When he's here, he's at Boba Phil. I'm at Drunken Yoda 1 and at Mad Eggy Wigs, who hasn't been here for the last few weeks. Facebook /lastmovieoutpost, Instagram at lastmovieoutpost. And you can find us for all the latest in movie news, streaming news, and everything cool about film. We are the cool news now. So thank you very much for watching, and we will see you on the next stream.